Destiny appeared on a Piers Morgan show, and I have to say, man, I don't know if Destiny left his brain at home or if his brain is working from home and has slow internet, because what occurred in this debate was egregiously terrible. Piers ends up asking Destiny whether he would accept an endorsement from Hitler, and I don't even know why Destiny even entertained the idea, but he did, and it did not go well for him.
Would you be proud if Dick Cheney endorsed you?
For running for president, you take any endorsement you can get, of course.
Really?
Just because somebody endorses you,
whoa,
just
hang
because
on.
somebody endorses you doesn't mean that you support their beliefs.
You take any endorsement you can get. So if Adolf Hitler decides to offer an endorsement, you would accept it.
A vote is a vote. Just because somebody endorses you doesn't mean that you have to. What does it mean to reject an endorsement?
You literally take an endorsement from Adolf Hitler to win power?
Well, right now I wouldn't, because Hitler's dead. So I don't know what is the point. Do you have to go around and try to disavow different segments of voters that are voting for you? This is such a nonsense question.
And I agree with Destiny towards the end, not with the Hitler part, towards the end, where he says that it's a nonsense question. Yes, of course, it's an absolutely nonsense question. I don't even know why Piers even thought that was a good question. To juxtapose Dick Cheney with Hitler is incomparable. You guys already know that Hitler committed atrocities far beyond what was humane, obviously. And Dick Cheney, well, there's a story behind Dick Cheney, but we'll get into that soon. Now, going back to the whole Hitler endorsement, anytime anybody mentions Hitler, I think that it's very important to just knock it down immediately. To me, it doesn't matter if you have a 4D chess rationalization about the situation. Like, for instance, in this case, Piers asked if you would accept an endorsement from Hitler. When Destiny attempts to explain, well, a vote is a vote, it doesn't matter where it comes from, it can potentially indicate to people that I don't care about the morals or ethics. I just want the vote, and it's my turn to be president. And what I think that Destiny should have done was immediately slap down the idea that Hitler endorsing someone else other than himself would even be possible. Who would Hitler want to endorse? He would want to take the power for himself. Obviously, this guy was attempting to take over the world. It's so out of character for Hitler to want to endorse someone else. That's why this question is so mind-numbingly, unbelievably, disastrously stupid. And I'm telling you, this question is dangerous, man. If you ask anybody this question, they'll start to uncontrollably convulse, and they'll drop to the floor, start foaming at the mouth because of the overperforming brain circuitry. Synapses will short circuit and explode, brain cells will be laid off, and some of them will even go on strike. And honestly, I was genuinely considering joining them. And the sad thing is that I agree with Destiny to an extent. But I'm going to explain that in a bit. But going back to the Piers and Destiny debate, it's just sad to me to see that when Destiny attempts to explain it, you just see that Piers, he's just hammering on Destiny and not even allowing him to gain any footing.
This is an absurd standard. If somebody wants to vote for you, then allow them to vote for you. If their fans want to vote for you, then allow them to vote for you. Why would you sit here and fight against an endorsement for a vote?
Well, okay, let me go to somebody who actually
Absolute nonsense.
Okay, well, I don't agree with you. I think you've just discovered you've opened a can of worms and you can't work out a way to get out of it. Destiny doesn't mind having endorsements from Adolf Hitler or Kim Jong-un.
All right, I guess. Let's go ahead and move on, man. That is just depressing. So now let's discuss Cheney. So if you don't know about Dick Cheney just recently came out and endorsed Kamala Harris. Now, he didn't explicitly say it. Instead, his daughter Liz Cheney came out in an interview and stated that Dick Cheney and herself are not only endorsing Kamala Harris, but are also voting for her.
Dick Cheney, your father, a beloved figure among Democrats for many, many years. If you know who he will be supporting or who he'll be voting for, do you care to share with us who he might be voting for?
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala Harris.
Okay.
Now, this is a big deal because both Dick and Liz Cheney are conservatives. And they no longer align themselves with the Republican Party. But that doesn't mean that they don't align themselves with conservative values. They very much do. But this is a big deal because obviously they're voting for the opposing team. Now, it's a big deal because a lot of people are asking, well, why do you want to accept an endorsement from Dick Cheney, considering his past? Now, let's go ahead and get into the past. Now, 9/11. It happened under the George Bush administration, and of course Dick Cheney was the vice president. And at the time, he was all for war. And most importantly, and I think that this is probably the number one issue that is highlighted anytime anybody ever mentions Cheney, is the EITs, which is an acronym for Enhanced Interrogation Techniques. Back then, when the US was still at war with Afghanistan, Iraq, Dick Cheney stated that EITs were absolutely necessary. And this is how the process unfolded. The US would go into Afghanistan or Iraq or other countries that were harboring Taliban or Al-Qaeda members, and they would capture them, take them over to I don't think they would take them to the States. They would take them to a remote location, then they would take them to Guantanamo. At least I think that was the process. And essentially they would perform these enhanced interrogation techniques. And some of these interrogation techniques were techniques such as sleep deprivation, stressed positions, confined in a small space. Other techniques such as walling. If you don't know what that is, essentially if you've ever seen the Batman where he picks up the Joker and just slams him to a wall, walling. And then of course waterboarding. And I'm not talking about the activity where you're being tugged by a speedboat, skiing on water and having a blast. And trust me when I tell you, man, just me telling you guys these techniques and kind of describing to you guys what they did, it doesn't exactly do any justice. You have to actually read what the fuck these guys did, because when I read the report, I was like, damn, the US could do that? And I'm gonna go ahead and read this shit to you guys, because you guys are grown-ass adults, man. You guys can handle this shit. Now, of course, if you don't want to hear this, go ahead and skip over to the next timestamp. This is gonna be the only video that ever has a timestamp. That's for the people who don't want to listen to this. But if you want to listen to this and you have a strong stomach, then I highly encourage you to listen to this. I'm gonna go ahead and start off at the top. The interrogations of CIA detainees were brutal and far worse than the CIA represented to policymakers and others. Beginning with the CIA's first detainee, Abu Zubaydah, and continuing with numerous others, the CIA applied its enhanced interrogation techniques with significant repetition for days or weeks at a time. Interrogation techniques such as slaps and wallings, parentheses, slamming detainees against a wall, were used in combination, frequently concurrent with sleep deprivation and nudity. So these guys were getting naked and, of course, sleep deprivation. Second paragraph, the waterboarding technique was physically harmful, inducing convulsions and vomiting. Abu Zubaydah, for example, became completely unresponsive with bubbles rising through his open, full mouth. Imagine you just get done waterboarding some guy and then you just take off the towel only for him to look like this. And he has like bubbles just rising out of his mouth. Like, that is a terrifying sight. Internal CIA records describe the waterboarding of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as evolving into a series of near drownings. Sleep deprivation involved keeping detainees awake for up to 180 hours, which is about a week and a day, usually standing or in stressed positions, at times with their hands shackled above their heads. At least 5 detainees experienced disturbing hallucinations during prolonged sleep deprivation, and in at least 2 of those cases, the CIA nonetheless continued the sleep deprivation. And then this next part is just plain brutal. At least 5 CIA detainees were subjected to rectal rehydration or rectal feeding without documented medical necessity, which means that they were forcibly shoving food up these detainees' anuses. The CIA led several detainees to believe they would never be allowed to leave CIA custody alive, suggesting to one detainee that he would only leave in a coffin-shaped box. One interrogator told another detainee that he would never go to court because "we can never let the world know what I have done to you," was his quote. CIA officers also threatened at least 3 detainees with harm to their families, to include threats to harm the children of the detainee, threats to SA, the mother of a detainee, and a threat to cut the detainee's mother's throat. Yeah, pretty insane stuff, man. And trust me when I tell you, it doesn't even end there. There are many, many more interrogation techniques. So, you know, some of them sound comical, such as tossing a detainee into a confined space where there's nothing but speakers. And imagine, like, they end up turning up Rebecca Black's Friday song all the way to max volume, and you're listening to that like for an entire week. Like, imagine what that can do to a person. Like, you would think that every single day is Friday, and on top of that, you have no silence. It's absolute torturous. And here's the thing, you're probably wondering, like, the government allowed this to happen? No. What actually happened was that the government was attempting to regulate that, but the CIA, they didn't want any of that. According to this report, what the CIA would do is submit results, but the reality is that these results were just bogus. What was happening was that they were getting confessions, but they were false confessions. Obviously, because these detainees were being tortured, they were just willing to give anything up, even if the information was fabricated. And not only that, the report also indicates that the CIA was attempting to shape public opinion by using manipulation tactics and black propaganda, so then they can be like, oh, look at it, like this works. Enhanced techniques, they work. We should obviously invest more resources into this. But the reality is that these enhanced interrogation techniques were so unbelievably inefficient that they couldn't produce results, which is why they ended up getting discovered, because they weren't producing anything. There was no results. But it wasn't just that. There was just so many avenues where revelations were popping up, such as congressional inquiries, public pressures, leaks, internal investigations, whistleblowers, which is why my mind gets blown when conspiracy theorists believe that the government is lying to us. It's like, with so many eyes, it's pretty difficult to keep a lie a secret for too long. And so when former President Obama got into office, almost exactly on that first day, he issued an executive order to end the program immediately. Because Vice President Cheney was gonna end that shit. Fuck that. He fucking enjoyed that. He was all about that. But that's the reason why Cheney is not liked by the Democrats. And guess what? The victims, the detainees, are still at Guantanamo. They have not been released at all after 20 years. And I hope you heard that, because I used the word detain, because these guys were never formally properly charged. They've been detained for 20 years without ever going to court. So that's a shocking revelation that I read last night. In the States, when you get detained for about 72 hours, at least in most states. But imagine, like, you get detained and then they just forget about you, and then you've been in jail for like 20 years. Imagine that. So knowing all of this information about Dick Cheney, and of course Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala Harris, this goes back to Destiny's point about a vote is a vote. I look at that now and ask myself, would I accept an endorsement from Cheney? Well, it's contextual. It totally depends on the circumstance. In this case, Kamala Harris views Donald Trump as someone who could potentially end democracy. If that's how she's going to view Donald Trump, and that's how Dick Cheney's going to view Donald Trump, and he ends up endorsing Kamala Harris, because Kamala looks at Donald Trump as the potential end for American democracy, which is a huge deal. A lot of people see Donald Trump in that way. And I'm pretty sure even MAGA supporters, they see the end of America, because obviously I hear Donald Trump talk about how if they vote for Kamala, or if Kamala wins, they will have no country. So imagine, put yourself in that fear. If you're Kamala Harris and you see Donald Trump as a threat to democracy, I think that if it isn't Hitler or Kim Jong-un, right, I think that you would also accept that particular endorsement. So yeah, guys, what a crazy video, man. I hope you guys understand why I, to an extent, agree with Destiny, why Dick Cheney is not exactly liked by Democrats, why it's a big deal for Dick Cheney to endorse Kamala Harris, and why Kamala Harris is accepting that endorsement. So yeah, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it here. Hopefully you guys got the gist of it. I'm gonna go ahead and link all the sources down below if you guys want to go ahead and check that out. And yeah, with that being said, that's all I have for you guys. And yeah, hopefully you guys learned something today.